Hello, everyone, and welcome to SPE Live. I'm your host, David Gibson. Super excited to be here with y'all today. All right, today joining us on this SPE Tech Talk is Schlumberger. Today's discussion will be about collaborating to digitally transform oil and gas operations. Yes, you heard that correctly. Digital oil and gas operations. And you are here watching with us, and we're super excited about it. So please let us know where y'all are watching from, and we will flash your name up onto the screen. We'll give you guys a little bit of a shout out. A whole bunch of you guys did it for the last episode. We really do appreciate that. We want as much engagement from you guys as possible. It's the whole reason that we're doing this live. If it wasn't live, we would have just done a podcast or just put some videos out on YouTube. But we want to be able to interact with you here live. We've got experts coming on to be able to tell us so much about this digital transformation. So your questions, your comments, your feedback is what we want to be able to highlight and fire over to the experts. Obviously, y'all aren't asking me any questions. That's not the point of this, right? All right. So joining me for this tech talk are Matt Mohajer and Marcus Rossi. Matt is currently the digital program manager for Schlumberger Production Systems. He has been with Schlumberger for 15 years, working in Canada, UK, Norway, and the US. In addition to creating digital strategy, Matt also enjoys the overall digital transformation and the green journey of the energy industry. Alongside Matt today, we also have Marcus Rossi, Global Service Manager for Schlumberger's Production Systems. Marcus focuses on digitally enabled performance services for process systems, pipelines, value, and CO2. Marcus recently also crossed his 15-year anniversary with Schlumberger, holding production-related positions in Brazil, Europe, Middle East, and now Texas. Welcome to this XPE Tech Talk, and thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having us on board here. Very glad to have this opportunity to discuss with Matt and you, and obviously the audience around digital transformation, especially on the production domain.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. We are so excited here. And as David mentioned, let's keep this live. Let's keep it a dialogue. We are happy to answer as many questions as you have as time permits.
Excellent. So we're going to start off the questions, but I do want to say this. We've already got a bunch of people watching. I see Arizona, Texas, Abu Dhabi. All right, we can go ahead and fire them off. So we got Troy from Arizona. I'm just going to say Malaysia. I even asked Matt just to make sure that I pronounced his name right before we did this, right? Francisco from Dallas, Texas. LinkedIn user who's the most famous person from Houston. Diego Leon in Midland, Texas. Ricky in Aberdeen. Saeed in Saudi, Paul in Abu Dhabi, Iyad in Morgantown, West Virginia, Dara in Turkey, or is it Batman, Turkey? Wow. I've never heard of that before. Ian in Kuala Lumpur, Kevin, it looks like in Denver, and then Ahmad in Nigeria. Thank you guys all so much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching and engaging with us. Please fire off your questions as we go through it. All right. So let's get started here. All right, make sure I've got all my stuff ready to go. All right, guys, it seems like most digital solutions are changing more rapidly than ever. Just this week, LinkedIn has made another change in how we can live stream. Even our virtual studio, the one that we're broadcasting with here, has rolled out multiple updates just this past week. Transformations and maximizing returns can be a steep hill to climb. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, David. Digital transformation is ever changing, right? We are in a daily change. There are a lot of updates either on the oil and gas industry or learnings across different industries. So I think we're all responsible in the oil and gas industry to bring that on board and be embracing that change. So here we are to discuss a bit more details on that. So I'll pass to Matt, maybe some additional comments there.
Absolutely. I can take that on board and just elaborate a bit more, right? Especially as David mentioned, we are looking at, production operation. This is the fun and very dynamic part and extremely diverse and probably most rewarding part of our industry, right? So in this area, supporting our customer in achieving overall asset performance ambitions, production optimization. There is a lot we have been focusing on. To highlight a few, right, to just get things started, right. One of the key elements that we are looking at is understanding of the fluid across the entire production system. By that I mean like from reservoir, wells, network, facility, and then also through this journey of the fluid and hydrocarbon, we are also embedding a lot of equipment to assist and ensure the flow of the through the system, right? So ability to understand this equipment is also very key. So to name a few in this journey, like from intelligent completion, ESPs, wellhead, multi-phase boosters, to name a few, and all the way to valve and facilities, dehydration, and desaltation, etc. Then the last point is that to make sure we understand what digital means for our industry, what it can do for our industry. So we do have a lot of history of simulation capability, and now making sure we are pairing that with operational technology, data contextualization is where the fun actually starts. So now we are able to take this model where it should be and put them to work for us, right? Whether there's at the edge control system all the way or to the back office, right? And by doing all of this, we are able to showcase and help our customer in this journey and look at the totality of the system, where we can look into the overall system uptime and also performance. Through this talk, we will give you some example later on, but I'll pass this to David to take forward, or Marcus.
Well, people see competitors or see your competitors and flashy marketing words around every corner. As an example, is like words like openness, domain knowledge, flexibility. Do they have much weight anymore? And how can a company demonstrate demonstrate they possess the traits to feel authentic? To be able to actually carry out these things. Let's start with you, Matt, and then Marcus, if you'll follow up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? We will talk about we have been talking about openness quite a bit, right? And I do believe that we still have as a whole industry to do a lot more within this scope, right? Openness requires changing the way we work, changing the way we collaborate. Marcus will share some example of that later on. But I think it's very key to our industry to look into, there is no one system fit all, right? So, and then collaboration is key to make sure it happens. Also enabling us in looking into the totality of the system, as I mentioned, right? So there are so many different parts and pieces in this journey that we need to make sure we are bringing everything together and make sure everything works together seamlessly, right? Marcus, if anything you want to add?
No, for sure, Matt. I think you mentioned the totality or the overall view of the system, which is quite critical. But at the same time, sometimes we discuss a lot about this, which is integrated but modular. So we would have the ability to have to look at modularity, to integrate. And when we talk about openness, I think this is the point, David, that we can represent the ability to be open is to integrate modules into others companies' transformation. And there are some imperatives for me that are critical on digital transformation, that openness is one of them. The other one is a technology breadth, right? The understanding that each company will have on technology and have the ability to play with different type of technology, both on the digital domain, but also on the traditional hardware domain, because at the end, we're trying to make what is out in the ground working in a better way. And then after that, the next imperative would be the ability to scale, because what we see as a challenge on transformation strategy is that you go to MVP, a minimum viable product, or a small sprint, and then you replicate maybe a few times, but then you cannot even scale and extract the significant value of it. So this is another imperative. The last one I'll touch is the depth of knowledge, or what is the know-how that company you have across the domain that we're working on. So I think in production systems, we quite strongly positioned with those imperatives that I mentioned, and the domain knowledge is something that we always latch on, because we believe that's how we collaborate seamless with the client, right? We share those knowledges between us and the client in a way that we speak in the same language and not necessarily need to have translators in between.
All right, so I got another question for both of you here. Where have you seen the industry struggle to adopt digital solutions, and what are some of the challenges? Marcus, you go first.
Sure, I think the challenges are linked to those imperatives that I mentioned, right? The struggles would come mainly on the ability to make a change, to embrace that change, as digital transformation is not only the digital technology itself, but also a change on culture, on how things will work. So we'll try to demystify a bit some terms on the discussion here about digital, because everyone points as the word digital as a solution, but digital is really the enabler. And I think that understanding is very important to overcome challenges on management of change, on how the processes that are in place need to change, how people need to adapt, or how people need to evolve to embrace those new processes that would be in place, or even the automation of some processes that not necessarily means reduction on personnel, but it means that personnel can be used to higher value activities, right? Which is always in our minds when we're talking about automated workflows.
So I think Marcus covered quite a bit of that, right? So, and I think it's just to add a couple of elaboration on that, right? So one of the key challenges we notice in our industry is how we're going to scale and sustain these solutions, right? And what do we really mean by that, right? When we look at the developing a new digital solution, right? There's no shortage of ideas in our industry, right? We have a lot of smart people that they have a lot of good experience. So, and adding digital to that to enable them and support them to transform the way they work is great. And there's a lot of idea like that. But then from ideation to get to the MVP, minimum viable product, and then all the way to the full scale field deployment is a challenge for some of these solutions. And the challenge sometimes comes about, limiting the scope from the beginning. Maybe the design, we are not considering all the challenges we're going to face when we go full scale. Sometimes there are challenges around infrastructures, and then also the cost of actually requires to make sure this goes to the full scale deployment. So some of those challenges that maybe we are not scaling up as quickly as we hope so. And then also once it's scaled up, how are we going to maintain this system, right? So, and that goes with the beginning when we were talking about looking at developing a system together, but at the same time we need to make sure we are not over customizing this system and this solution so they don't become a challenge in maintenance and sustaining them. Right, so I think it's just become a bit of a balancing act between, okay, how much customization versus how much encapsulation and making sure some of the workflows that everyone can use.
All right, Marcus, let's take a step back real quick and view this from the industry perspective. How does energy and oil and gas get the best return on investment on going digital?
So very good, David. That's an interesting question, and I will split that question in two answers, and I'll share those answers with Matt, because there is two ways of looking at it. On the return on investment, you can look from the planning aspect, or you can look from the operation aspect. And so I'll cover the operation aspect first, and then Matt will go reverse chronologically to talk about planning. So for us in operations, the challenge, or to get the highest return on investment, is really the ability to make the integration with the overall system. So we talk a lot about assets and systems, or which would be a group of assets operating. We believe that during operations, there is two additional aspects if you compare to planning, which is the physical constraint on what is in the ground, what is in operations, right? That reduces the ability or the degree of freedom that you can have on the optimization that will bring those returns. And also, on the other hand, there is a benefit that you have live data and you know what's going on. So, when I talked about integration of models, it's important to think about what are these models we're talking about, because several times in digital discussions we hear that data-driven models will solve everything. So particularly in Schlumberger, we have the understanding that there is a need for a hybrid model, or hybrid models, if you want, that are integrated. And that means data-driven models, but also physics-driven models, because the understanding of the physics is quite important, right? So as an example, in our case, we have operations of gas facilities that we operate with clients, and those are hundreds of wells producing to few facilities. And one of the applications that we see is how do we optimize the alignment of different wells to those facilities to match the objective of the customer. So to be able to deploy something like that, it's a high investment because that is we're talking about hundreds of thousands of tags connected to live models that would be tuned to be run in parallel with what's going on in actual operation, and that supports the decision. So this decision is based on those objectives that will bring the returns of investment that we're talking about. So from there, I will pass to Matt to talk a bit more from the planning perspective on the return of investment.
Very good, Marcus. Thanks. So yeah, I think planning cycle or field development planning cycle is one of the most challenging and interesting parts, right, of oil and gas development. This is the part that is very capex heavy. There is a lot of money spent without any productions. Sometimes, there is absolutely no revenue. Is only cost for operators, right? So most of the time to first oil and gas is the one of the key driver, right? But at the same time, we want to make sure we get there very safely, and by making sure we have all the right plans and all the risk built into our models, right? This is where actually digital have been helping quite a bit, right? We have been using software simulation capability for many years to make sure we are able to model and understand what's in the reservoir, what it would be the production profiles, and based on that, actually we designed the entire production system, including number of wells, what's the network, and how the facility going to be built. And that's the part that some of these models are very time consuming. And now with the advances in digital and cloud computing played a huge role. So now we actually, more than ever, we can run these models, build different scenarios to make sure that we capture all the what ifs that we are able to consider, and make sure our forecasts are as fidel as possible, and also risk-based scenarios are built in and understood within the team. Now making sure leveraging the recent development around the collaboration, openness, especially digital, has a key role to play here to make sure all the verticals within this journey are synced to each other, the tasks are shared and planned properly, and making sure these fields are not only developed for the seamless startup, but also for the entire life of the field in mind.
Wow. A lot going on there. All right. Something I've heard people say is, I'm not sure you're going to, or I'm not sure you're hearing this too, but companies that are saying we're not there yet when it comes to digital transformation, are there digitalized solutions to help them? And how can these companies manage assets and improve production?
I'll take that, David. So absolutely, there are ways of doing as a starting point with non-digital offerings, right? As global service manager, we look at one of our offerings to be providing the client with expertise on an offering that we call A2O. So it's audit to optimize, where we look at not just the aspect of what needs to be digitized if needed, but looking at optimization of what is on the ground. Could be equipment replacement or equipment upgrades. And I'm saying this in broader terms. It doesn't need to be a Schlumberger equipment for us to go out there. We go out there. We have experts that understand the overall process engineering aspect of facilities, or even looking at broader field from the well all the way to the producing facilities, or later on to pipelines. Look at what are the potential opportunities for optimization, and then discuss collaboratively with the client on what our recommendation on it. So I think this is a starting point for someone that is not yet into digital solutions. I believe in general, there are some aspects of digital solutions, especially when we talk about all those equipment in the field. They are instrumented, so there is data available, and we can start from an offline analysis and evaluation, and then moving into, and even on the ground on site with our teams globally, and then moving into something that would be connected if the client is interested on that type of solution.
And for those who are transforming, do you have any win-win stories to share, or elaborate on some performance-based successes?
Sure. So sorry, Matt, I'll jump on this one as well. It's very linked to the previous question. Yeah, previous question is very linked. So we talk about those evaluations. In those evaluations, and also the digital technology, I think it's an enabler. We said a few times about the word digital being an enabler. It's an enabler to also change commercial models. So I think those win-win situations is when customers are interested to take some risks, and we would go along with customers and look at a risk-reward compensation approach, where there are different commercial models that are possible to be done, because with a connected asset, you are then looking at the performance of the asset and also advising the client on how to operate assets that we have the know-how. Obviously, there are some assets that the clients might have the know-how themselves, which will not make total sense to do that type of commercial model. But again, back to what our original point, we talk about assets here in piece by piece. I think the way to look at digital is the ability to do that integration. So when we talk about different commercial models, we are also looking at the full production journey from the well all the way to the export line. Matt, you want to add there maybe?
Yeah, actually, no, I think you covered quite well, Marcus. Just one thing to add, I think you mentioned it briefly, but just to elaborate a bit, right? Digital is a mean to an end, right? It's not the end itself, right? Adopting digital is going to help us to achieve our goals, but the goals ourselves are identified, and the challenges needs to be understood on the way that we go forward, right? So I think that's a key aspect of looking at this. And also, when we talk about some of this performance-based engagement, I think digital is going to bring a bit of a transparency, making sure we have shared understanding of the same production journey, and then we can actually look into the detail of how actually we can collaborate further with each other to make sure everything is well understood and the goals are achieved at the end of this journey.
So David, maybe I'll before if there is any other questions there, but
no,
maybe
go ahead.
I'll take the opportunity, and also would like to share an example of a digital solution, because we've been talking here about a lot of concepts and some examples that we mentioned verbally, but maybe some visual would help to look at this, right? So one of the services we provide, it's called Process Live Data Enrichment Performance Service. And normally this we can cover across different assets. I mentioned before assets and systems, right? So we cover across different assets in a facility, or looking at a full facility or a full production systems all the way to the wells. So the approach here is to actually have a system on top of the trivial data that is received by a DCS or a SCADA. And it's not just about the data, but also the knowledge that we have on the equipment. So in this view, we're looking at data being streamed from a valve that potentially could have a fugitive emission, which is a hot topic, right, in the industry, especially quite timely with the discussion on COP26. So a lot of discussions around emissions there. And this is a solution that helps not just from the performance of the equipment, but also from the GHG emissions control approach. So Here you see some screens of the solution where you look the performance of a group of valves that could be high cycling. It's important to mention that those valves that I'm referring to here, they're normally isolation valves, and they are quite critical for the system, where if the valve fails, then there is a HSE risk in general, not just for the environment, but maybe for safety as well. So this is one example of our offerings. It could be across oil treaters, it could be across gas equipment like membranes, gas membranes, CO2 removal membranes, or equipments in the gas train. Could be a seawater treatment equipment, compression. So we're looking at different equipments we process live. And inside our group, there is the other offerings around equipment, going all the way back to the gathering network, if it is a subsea system, or also a well performance system, right? So I think this is an example of what we provide. And we mentioned before about collaboration with the customer. I think it's also important to talk about the collaboration with potential partners in the industry, which is linked to that openness topic, right? So these systems, we have foundational digital infrastructure. We have some modules that are offered either integrated or in a modular way, but they're also open to work with other players in the industry to bring them into the same ecosystem for the client, obviously.
I really liked the video. I have to say that it was really cool. And he just did the little digital wave. I wish I could do that here at my office. And then everything would work. It'd just be like a little digital bomb. Just, all right, guys, we've got a couple of minutes remaining. I want to be able to get y'all's last thoughts to be able to put together. If you had one thing you could snap your fingers and educate the entire audience of the oil and gas industry about the digital transformation, what would that be?
So I can go first on that one. So I would re-highlight the three ingredients that I mentioned at the beginning. First, understanding the fluid characterization through the entire journey is very key. Second, understanding and the knowledge of the equipment through this journey is very important. And then lastly, defining what digital means for oil and gas is extremely important. And lastly, let's not remember that this is a very fun journey. It's very diverse and it's very dynamic. Thanks.
Thank you. Marcus.
Yeah, so similarly to Matt, I think the points are important to keep those imperatives in mind. Everyone is looking at how to gain efficiencies in overall. I believe those imperatives we mentioned here are critical. I also believe that we need to, as part of the industry, need to look at what are actual deployments, what are real deployments, examples, and who are capable of delivering those solutions. And I do believe, out of the experience of that you mentioned at the beginning, that me and Matt have here together more than 30 years in the industry, plus the rest of the breadth of Schlumberger that can provide support and can provide collaborative solutions with our customers, we are a very strong partner to play in this space, and we are doing it. I think the whole industry has seen where we have gone through this, and this is also important. Our position is also important because of the understanding and the domain knowledge in talking about the same language that we were speaking before, right? So I'll close with that.
Well, Marcus and Matt, thank you both so much for being here. And for everybody out there that's watching, if you have not already, you can connect with me. That's okay on LinkedIn. And Marcus and Matt, if you've got any more questions, please be sure to be able to follow up with them. Thank you all so much for being here. Please stay tuned for future SPE Tech Talks. We're going to keep these coming like almost one a week with you guys out there. We love the engagement. We love you guys being here. Marcus and Matt, is LinkedIn the best way to be able to get a hold of you guys if anybody out there is wanting to touch base with you?
Absolutely. Well done.
All right. Excellent. So be sure, like, share, subscribe, do all the things that fools LinkedIn to thinking that we're the most awesome group and people out there. So until next time, as I always say, know your industry.